Who was the first person to climb Mount Everest? And how did they do it? The answer is complicated, but the story that explains it is one of the greatest episodes in world history, showing all of the best and worst sides of humanity. We've only actually known how tall Everest is since the 1850s, when its height was first calculated by Indian mathematician Radhanath Sikdar, one of a huge team of cartographers working on a decades-long survey under British Surveyor General Andrew Woe. Despite this peak already having local names in both Nepalese and Tibetan, he decided to dedicate its English name to his predecessor, the Welshman Sir George Everest. Before too long, the Brits had been beaten to both the South and the North Poles by Amundsen and the Norwegians, meaning that the golden era of trophy expeditions was running out of trophies, and all eyes turned to these great as yet unconquered peaks in the Himalayas. For me, the spirit of those days is summed up nowhere better than in the famous quote from George Mallory, a mountain climber from Cheshire. When asked why he wanted to climb Everest, he simply replied, "Because it's there." Mallory served in World War I before joining all of Britain's great interwar Everest expeditions, and was famously last seen just 600 metres below Everest's summit with climbing partner Andrew Irvine in 1924. Although neither time nor conditions were on their side, we'll obviously never know whether or not they actually reached the summit before they died. And so to this day, some people speculate that they might have been the first people to stand on top of the world. But of course, any good mountaineer will tell you that the destination isn't the summit. The destination is making it back down safe. And so the competition carried on. Each of the Mallory expeditions had pushed techniques and knowledge slightly further, but it was really when the age of exploration was again paused for World War II, providing wartime innovations in things like equipment and clothing and boots, that the next generation was really given its great leg up. Nylon ropes had been invented, and perhaps best of all, new vacuum-sealed food was so much lighter than the tins that the previous expeditions had been relying on. Wartime aerial photography also provided new intelligence about Everest's makeup, and crucially, Nepal's period of isolation that had forced all climbers to attempt from the northern Tibetan face had been ended, and Nepal began issuing permits for attempts from the more promising looking south side. Given all the footage that we now have of the south side and the famous Khumbu icefall trying to kill people with either crevasses or avalanches or both, it may seem strange to describe it as promising. But everybody knew that as long as that part could be conquered, the higher parts of Everest on the south side looked like they provided much better opportunities for a quick summit. The first mission to successfully navigate the Khumbu icefall featured a man named Tenzing Norgay. The son of a yak herder, Tenzing was born in Nepal in 1914 and belonged to the Sherpa people, a distinct ethnic group native to the Himalayas. As a teenager, he left home first to live in Darjeeling, then of course a part of British India, before returning to Nepal, where his exceptional ability was first noticed during a British high-altitude reconnaissance mission. And then in the 1952 season, he was invited to join the Swiss summit expedition, not as one of the hundreds of porters, but as a full climbing member. He and Swiss climber Raymond Lambert set a new record after turning around an agonizing 250 meters below the summit due to a failing oxygen mask. But on the way down, Tenzing knew that now he had stood higher than anybody else ever had before, and began to think that maybe he might be destined for something great. By the way, support for making these videos comes from our members club, and you'll find the details in the description if you'd like to join it. Also, don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss any new videos here on YouTube. Meanwhile, down in New Zealand, a local beekeeper is about to enter our story. Edmund Hillary was born in Auckland in 1919, of course in those days a British dominion, and funded his weekends climbing in the New Zealand Alps by selling honey until signing up to fly in the Royal New Zealand Air Force in World War II. After the war, he grew into a more and more skilled and obsessed climber, and he also caught the eye of the British team led by John Hunt that were gearing up for the 1953 mission, their highest stakes Everest summit attempt yet. Britain's population, economy and morale had been devastated by the war. Wartime rationing was still in place at this point, and the loss of the empire and the death of the king had left many Brits with little to feel proud about. Knowing all this, the climbing team desperately wanted to put their 1953 permit to good use by claiming the Everest summit for Britain right before the new Queen was coronated. With the following year's permits already having been granted to the French, the alternative was too painful to even think about. It had to be now. The grueling months-long process of trekking first from Kathmandu to base camp and then traversing the icefall back and forth carrying tons and tons of equipment up to progressively higher altitude mini camps sees them risking their lives with every step in pursuit of this one goal. And there's even an incident where Hillary falls into a crevasse and is saved by Tenzing, forming a deep bond between the two of them. And eventually conditions are deemed good enough for a run at the summit. Two English climbers, Chris Evans and Tom Bordelon, again set a new record by making it even higher before being agonisingly forced back just 90 metres below the summit. And 3 wind-battered days later, the weather clears again on the 29th of May 1953, and the next team is paired up for a summit assault. This time it's Tenzing and Hillary. They go even farther until they can basically smell the summit, before being blocked by this 12-metre sheer rock face. Imagine having been trekking at high altitude for months only to have to conquer this as well. And obviously, yeah, you have to also imagine it without ropes since nobody had ever been up there before. But unbelievably, Hillary goes for it. He wedges himself into this gap, forcing his feet and knees against the rock on his left side and the ice on his right, and later describes it as being as simple as shimmying up a chimney. Of course, yeah, just a chimney at higher than a plane's cruising altitude, where one slight wrong move would mean your certain death. Yeah, normal, just standard Christmas Eve job. But he somehow makes it to the top of what was from then on known as the Hillary Step, named after the only person to ever need to conquer it without ropes, and proceeds to help Tenzing up. With that achieved, they're just a short hike away from the triumphant moment that they finally step onto the summit. They embrace on the top of the world as the only people to have ever summited Mount Everest, the world's tallest mountain. Hillary looks around for any evidence that Mallory and Irvine might have actually made it up there, before photographing all 4 directions to prove that they'd made it, and taking Tenzing's photo on top of the summit. Which I think tells its own story about Hillary. He's just achieved this amazing feat, and he immediately tries to find ways to credit these two from 30 years ago, and then finds a way to credit Tenzing for it. And they plant 4 flags up there: the United Kingdom, Nepal, India, and the United Nations, which I think is just such a great gesture, symbolising that, you know, it's an achievement for everybody. I mean, can you imagine the day that the first person from Earth visits Mars now? Do you think they'd really plant the flag of the UN these days? I mean, even today, our countries are trying to split Antarctica into like 14 pieces. So yeah, I find it unlikely. Famously, Tenzing even offers to take Hillary's photo on the summit, but he declines. And this huge call of Hillary's, having come all this way and declining to even take a picture of himself on top of Mount Everest to put on his mantelpiece back home, inadvertently leads to the world media of the 1950s uncharacteristically leading with the photo of the non-white member of the expedition. And yeah, unfortunately the topic of race brings us to the tense final chapter of this story, where the men who've bravely conquered the earth find that they might have a harder time conquering society. They make a pact to never reveal who stood on the summit first and head down to celebrate and warm up with the team at base camp, when they realise that there's still a chance to get the news back to London in time for the coronation. A team of runners led by Ten Sewang run over 200 miles through the mountains to the nearest wireless station to send the news urgently to Kathmandu, where it arrives at the British Embassy to be transmitted further to London, and incredibly, word of this great accomplishment successfully arrives home on the exact night before Queen Elizabeth II is getting coronated. The conquest was the perfect gift for the new queen and the jewel in the crown of a new era of pride for Britain. It is quite mad now looking back at all these old newspapers from the day of the Queen's coronation. You know, all this and Everest too. It really is just remarkable to have had these 2 things to report on the exact same day. But what's sad is that while Hillary's name is in the headline, you have to go down 1, 2, 3 font sizes to see Tenzing's name. And the Nepalese media is no better at all, immediately pressuring Tenzing when he arrives to Kathmandu to make a statement saying that he stood on the summit before Hillary. India, the country where Tenzing used to live, and of course newly independent from Britain, is also pushing Tenzing as the real hero, with political cartoons drawn showing him dragging a lifeless Hillary up to the summit. And they're forced to sit through all of these uncomfortable interviews looking absolutely delighted at having to constantly deflect questions about who summited first, which is madness. It was an immense team achievement, and all of their press statements were so carefully crafted to reflect exactly that. We. They paid endless tribute to the expeditions before them, to their Nepalese porters, to the entire operation staff, and they maintained that the exact summit order of the two men didn't matter. But the controversy wouldn't go away. The world wasn't satisfied with the whole, oh, it's for everybody thing. They wanted to know. Edmund Hillary and John Hunt, who had led the expedition, were both given knighthoods by the new queen. But Britain released a statement saying that after discussions with India and Nepal, Tenzing would be awarded the George Medal. Pretty good, but not even the more prestigious George Cross. And some foreigners had been given honorary knighthoods by this point, so if all of the countries had consented to it, it definitely would have been possible. But what I actually find weirdest about this whole thing is that despite so much being made of Tenzing's knighthood snub, India doesn't even give him their highest civilian honour. In fact, later, India goes on to give Hillary a higher award than what they gave Tenzing. Eventually, Tenzing was the first to break the silence, revealing in his autobiography, "We went on slowly, steadily, and then we were there. Hillary stepped on top first, and I stepped up after him. Now the truth is told, and I'm ready to be judged by it." But my favourite thing that I learned from this story is that despite that fact, history doesn't judge him for it at all. What's committed to the eternal public consciousness is their great joint achievement and not the media circus, just like it should be. I mean, I had heard of both of their names before I ever even tried to learn the details of the case, and it never even occurred to me as strange that the question, who climbed Mount Everest first, actually has two names as its answer. They were supposedly tethered by just 6 feet of rope at that point, so they were literally moving as a unit, as in one physical thing. So whoever's foot happened to go in front of the other at that time is really a matter of a couple of seconds anyway. You can't split the two of them based on anything more than just a coincidence, and besides, it's their ultimate collaboration that made the entire thing possible. What's so great about it is their deep bond and pushing each other on to do something that nobody had ever done before, and going on to take all of the praise and pressure that came with it together. The two met many more times over the years and remained friends, despite the world's first instincts having been to try to come between them. And both stayed active in the region, with Hillary being involved in the construction of 2 hospitals and more than 30 schools in the Himalayas. And Tenzing's notorious campaigning is credited with improving recognition and conditions for future Sherpa generations. Personally, I'm also thrilled to be releasing this and starting this new channel on what would have been Sir Edmund Hillary's birthday. When you read or listen to anything that he said, his good heart really shines through in a way that I think is so ahead of its time. And I think that we can all learn a good deal from his example. Yeah, I really wanted to start Empire Stories with Everest because I think it just has a bit of everything. It's such a great episode from history. And I think the 2 lead characters kind of represent all of the best parts of human collaboration. If you enjoyed this, please hit the like and subscribe so that you don't miss the next one. And if you'd like to directly support the making of new videos for this channel, like I mentioned, there's the details of how to join our members club in the description.